Hello, everybody. I hope you're all having an amazing day. It's Tuesday, which means it's Road to Master, but it's not Road to Master. Long story short, I recorded an episode. It was a really, really good episode, and I was super happy with it. Ended up winning the game pretty smoothly, but for some reason, half of the audio didn't record. So I had half a video of commentary, and then half a video of silence, and I didn't think that would be something you guys would be interested in watching. And I have to go very, very, very shortly. So, in order to get you guys a video out today, I figured I would go over some of my old theory for the Scotch. Now, the Scotch is one of my very favourite openings. And is one that got me all the way up to 1700, basically. So, this theory is good up to at least 1600. Potentially higher, depending on what you play, if you do some of your own tweaks and stuff. And there's a lot of sort of top level lines in this that I've stolen from other people. But anyway, so the Scotch is E4, E5, not D4. You start off with Knight F3, Knight C6, and then D4. Yeah, I don't know why I put D4 first, but it could transpose, I guess. Anyway, E takes D4. There we go. And then knight takes, and that's the whole point of the Scotch. There is something you can do called the Scotch Gambit with bishop to c4. However, if you're a beginner player or you just prefer more solid games, I wouldn't quite recommend this. It gets very crazy, extremely fast. So unless you're ready for that, stay away. But knight takes is perfectly fine, and you might be able to see on the eval bar, depending on if I keep it in or not. It's saying 0-0, so it's perfectly even. A lot of players used to play the Scotch before sort of computers. Maybe more the Scotch Gambit, but the Scotch is just a very solid game. People sort of stopped playing it because it was almost too solid, and it gave black a good position, which is not particularly something you want. You want to be sort of pushing and challenging black. But if you don't really care about that and you just want to get into a quick, nice middle game, this is a perfect choice. And it's not something they can really avoid. Just a quick one as well. From D4, they could do a D6, at which point you could either push or takes. If takes, you just trade off queens, which is fine. They would take with the knight, and then you can do several things, including a long castle with check, which is just good. And then if they were to take with the knight, then you would take with the knight and have a similar sort of thing, which is all well and good as well. So knight takes. One thing they could do, not recommended, is do knight takes, at which point queen takes, obviously, to get back the piece. And then queen to f6. So this is the whole idea. They're just wanting to trade things off. But you don't really want to do that as white. You want to keep sort of the play about. So you could do a few things here. Queen c4 it seems to be good. Queen e3 seems to be good. I personally like e5. Just hitting the queen again. And the important thing is that you don't trade the queen, because knight takes just gives black good development. It's still fine, but gives black good development. So I like e5. And after queen to b6, so they're still trying to trade off queens. At this point, you are happy to trade off the queens, because they don't get much out of it, really. They don't get any piece of development. And this pawn's still here blocking the development of the knight, so they would go like a rook a5 or something. And then try to hit that, although that's not particularly good. Anyway, what have we got? Main lines. So, the main line, and it's called the classical line, is bishop to c5. There are a few tricks to this, but it's super simple, basically. You just sort of match it and you keep defending the knight. You don't do anything. You can trade off this knight at any time if you feel that way inclined, although I wouldn't particularly recommend it. And then go queen f6. There is a little trick they can do here, with some sort of, if the bishop wasn't here and they played a c3 first instead, queen f6, and now if they try to trade off, you have mate, which you might have seen in the PogChamps game. Moist Critical, I think, versus XQC happened there. Bishop c5, and then you just match the development. They can try the same, queen f6, but then that point c3 is perfectly solid. This is well defended in the center, and there's nothing really black can do to stop that. So it continues with knight g2 e7, because the knight can't go to f6. Black's looking to castle, white's looking to develop, and then castle, and it's just solid, like I said. So bishop to c4 is the next move, and this is just a nice square for the bishop. It likes it here. It's stopping a lot of shenanigans, pawn pushes, etc. And then something weird happens. Black goes knight to e5. And you might think, oh, the bishop's come to this diagonal, it wants to stay there. But no, for some reason, the bishop doesn't want to stay there, and the bishop prefers to go back to e2. Weird. I'm well aware it's weird. However, it's cool, because the bishop's actually doing a pretty good job of defending a lot of these squares, which could cause some problems with the queen on the counterattack. So once the knights come, you just drop the bishop back to e2. And then black can choose to do this weird queen move, queen g6. Now, on first look, this looks absolutely devastating for white. That's been hit, and that's been hit. And then once this has been hit, everything's been hit as well. So it's cheeky. And I actually got this in a position I didn't know what to do in a over-the-board classical game. I ended up losing pretty badly. It's important here, you just castle. You're actually happy giving black this pawn, because you're actually just going to complete your development. So the main move for black here is d6. But if they decide to take this pawn, that's actually point 8 for white here. So white's better, and you just go knight d2, and you complete your development. And black's only developed half their pieces. So you're just happy. Yes, you're down a pawn, but your bishops and your knights, they're doing an amazing job controlling the center. You're well developed, and you've got tons of ways you can go. So that's a rundown of the classical variation. Up next, we have the next popular, which is the Smith variation. And this is what you'll see all the grandmasters playing if they ever get around to playing the Scotch. It gives black probably the most active position, and you're not really responding to white. White's sort of responding to black. And here you're actually happy to trade off this knight, just to sort of damage pawn structure. If black decides to take inwards, you just trade off queens, as per usual. That's a good rule. If you ever get the chance to trade off the queen in the Scotch, go for it. It's a boring opening, and you should be happy playing a boring game without queens. So they take inwards, at which point you play bishop to d3. Now, this is a weird move, because it looks like you want to be on a more active square. But if you think about it, there's not actually many more active squares. This is covered by the bishop, this is covered by the pawn, and if you go to c4, you're getting kicked about by this d5 move. So you develop the bishop, and you might as well cover a pawn while you're at it. Bishop to b4 check is a bit annoying. And their plan is to sort of destroy your pawn structure. So you go knight to c3, and yes, you're developing, and yes, you're covering this pawn, but it's not really doing much. And then d5, that's black's plan the whole time. And it's the reason why this sort of pawn structure isn't as bad as it seems for black, is because this double pawn actually supports d5. And then once that's traded off, the double t-pawn can actually support it again. So it's actually quite nice. And d5, and you just take that. You don't really want to be messing around with too many pawns in the center. You're playing the Scotch, you want to trade off instantly. You know, you might as well keep with that. And then black actually has a pretty sneaky move here. They can choose to castle. And you might think, you're getting a free pawn out of this. But it's actually quite nasty after bishop to g4. You've got some problems about where your queen's going, to be honest. You've got some real problems. Rook to e8's coming, and it's nasty. So, if they decide to castle and give you the extra pawn, you just say no thank you, and castle yourself. Perfectly safe. They'll take the pawn back, which is fine. And you play h3. Now, h3 is a really important move, in my opinion. And it just stops any of that nasty bishop g4 nonsense. And here you just sort of play on. You both have bishop pairs. Black has a slightly worse pawn structure, although it's very minimal. You could push. And you're both sort of fighting for the open file. So it's good. It's good for both people, and that's the whole point. It's 0.1, so it's dead even. I would say black has a slightly nicer position to play. They've got a bit more room rather than white, who's a bit cramped. But yeah, it's perfectly good. The next line they have is bishop to b4. This is an interesting one because it could potentially go into the classical line after bishop to e3. The main move is to drop back, but they could go queen f6, and then this is actually the classical line, except white's a move ahead. You're a tempo up as white, so it's 0.7 for white, so it's slightly better, and you should be quite happy with this. But the main move is actually go back to bishop b6, which is quite common in the Scotch, quite a common idea, and it makes a lot of these sort of discovered attacks not work for white anymore. So your role here is to go knight to f5. Knight's hitting this, and it's defending the bishop. So black just takes. Apparently they can go queen f6 as well, which is a bit cheeky. But they would most likely just take here. Sorry, they would just take here, at which point you just take back with the knight. You don't want to double up your pawns. And then you just sort of, you continue your usual development. And have a nice game. This pawn might need some supporting. Maybe you could push it even. And black's a tiny bit underdeveloped. So it's just sort of nice, really. It's 0.5 as well. And then the last line, which you've seen on the channel already, called the Steinitz variation. Super tricky, super fun as well though, if you like a sharp tactical game. Queen to h5. Now, a lot of people as white might be saying, let's just trade off the knight, but this is actually not good. You're just giving black a pawn with queen takes e4 check. You can block however you want, and then they're just going to take whichever way. It doesn't particularly matter. Probably this way, free up the bishop with the pin, and life's just good for black. So you don't want to do that. But you are actually still giving up the pawn. So here you're actually going to go knight to c3. Temporarily covering the pawn, yes. But after bishop b4, you're going to see why that becomes a trouble here. How are you going to develop how are you going to protect this? You could go bishop to d3, but then the knight's hanging. You could push, but then surely black could just take the pawn. And you actually have to give it up. So the move here is a really sneaky one, actually. Is bishop to e2. Now, some people might not play this because it seems counterintuitive. You're giving up the pawn that you're fighting so hard to keep. But it's just quite nice for white, actually. And I really enjoy playing this as white as well. So queen takes, obviously, they're going after the pawn. The knight is currently pinned to the king, so that's why they can't do anything about that. And the knight's going to b5, and that's the whole point of the opening, is that the knight can go to b5 and cause so much trouble for black. So black's going to try trade off the bishop for the knight with check. Now the last thing you ever want to do, never ever do, is take back with the knight. You've lost your whole attack on the king and the rook. So you just take back with the pawn. And yes, you're doubling your pawns, but actually you're getting quite good activity from it. You're getting your rook open, and this could potentially push forward if they ever play like a d6. So how does black actually defend this now? They're going to have a very hard time doing so. Any sort of queen move, obviously they can't go there. If you go there, g3 supporting the bishop to f4 attack, and that just seems scary. And then you can get your bishop onto f3 as well if the queen ever moves. Castle, and you've got such a nice position. But the correct move is actually king to d8. So that's the main compensation, basically, for the pawn, is that the king loses its castling. Queen to... yes. And then you castle. It's important to note here, if they try to take this g-pawn, it doesn't work at all. It's completely winning for white because you have bishop to f3, which is just nasty. They've got no squares to cover this. The bishop's x-raying the rook, so that's all covered. They have no checks, and the knight's just going to go ahead and take this free rook. Thank you very much. So after king d8, castles, they're going to try develop. Rook e1, looking at some sort of discovered attacks on the queen. Rook to e8, and then you can sort of just play on bishop to e3, bishop to not this bishop yet because of the doubled rooks, but just some like pins, and just try prod at black really. Try poke at them, prod at them. This is quite a cool move. You're looking to undouble your pawns and mess them up because this pawn's obviously pinned as well. So yeah, you just sort of continue on there. It's a tricky one to play if you don't know what you're doing. You need to sort of really have an attacking mindset and be good at asking questions of black, really, because it is a weak position, and you just need to sort of play that weak position the best you can. But anyway, yeah, that's about everything they can do in the Scotch. I better actually show the proper Scotch. Everything they can sort of do in the Scotch, really. And this opening is just, I keep saying it's super solid because it is super solid, you know. And it's not really one people decline, you know. You can't really stop people doing it. They're expecting a Spanish or an Italian. You go ahead and play d4, and it's super solid. I would highly recommend this to anyone at all. I think even if it's not your type of opening, you could learn a lot from it because it's mainly sort of focused around pieces and how the pieces sort of interact with each other. So you'll learn a lot from it either way. But anyway, yeah, I hope you all enjoyed this. I know it was a bit rushed. Unfortunately, that other video did lose its audio, so I can't do anything about that. But yeah, let us know if you want any more openings. I know a few. I can research others if I don't know them. But yeah, thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Please like if you like. Please like if you liked. Please subscribe if you really liked. I'll catch you guys all tomorrow. Bye-bye.